the biggest thing that's happened in the news recently is Trump's decision to bomb Iran. A lot of mixed feelings about that. Everybody's for it. Everybody's against it.
It's the talk everywhere, right? You know,
That's
you
true,
go to the restaurant or at the water cooler or on your social media, everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of the different government accounts with the different branches of the military. I don't know if you do on social media, and see all these different videos of the bombings and things of that nature. And I'm just
cool,
like,
not
come
gonna
on,
lie.
let's go.
Yeah.
I'm one who's not against it. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody has an opinion, and that's okay. But I do think that we're on the right side of this one.
For sure.
People are saying that Trump's doing things that are illegal and trying to do things that will build an empire. I think he's protecting American interests.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's good to help people who are captive. Jesus came to set the captive free.
That's true,
And
he
so
did.
we're helping people who've been oppressed. There's a lot of human rights violations, of course, that have gone on in Iran. Iran has been a country that's been oppressed by this regime, and the one prior to it. I mentioned this to you before, that historically Iran was not a like a Muslim nation, not under Sharia law, but a Persian people, Zoroastrians, different things of that nature. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
What bothered me about some of the things I've seen are the liberal politicians, the men politicians, specifically women, of course, but some of these men politicians just have no backbone. It's just a crazy thing. Like they're so anti-American. I don't understand that, but it also just seemed like anti-masculinity too.
Yeah.
Like they just can't stand the bravado, the might of our military. They hate anything that's patriotic, you know. And I just don't understand that. That's a scary trend. I think we see that even across our country. We have seen that anyway across our country. I do feel like there's been a little bit of a revival of even men interested in church. I think over the last year, the statistics even show that women have always led.
Yeah.
I think it was like flip-flopped. It was like 40% to like 30-some%, and now it's like 36% to 27% where men, Gen Z, especially men, are active again, wanting to go to church, seeking truth. So that's awesome. But we still have a ways to go in America. I mean, where are those old-fashioned, you know, you think about an American man, you know, not just John Wayne, but I mean, even like Jesus Christ, of course, is the perfect example of what a biblical man should be. But that is the talk, the war in Iran. You know, back in, was it September of last year, Trump came out and gave the order where we changed the Department of Defense back to the historical name, the original intent. The name was Department of War.
So that was the original name.
George Washington, you know, back in the 1700s, it was started as the Department of War. And what that did is it advertised to the world around us our mindset and position that we weren't on the defense, we're on the offense.
That's good.
We're not going to wait till trouble comes to us. You know, we're going to go ahead and take care of this before it does. And that's exactly, you know, Trump did that in September, and you can see that with the different things that we've done, even with Venezuela and in Iran, that we're being proactive. And that's that America first thing. You know, we're protecting our interests at home by making sure that we handle business abroad. And I'd much rather for those bombs to fall over there and kill those people who need to be taken care of than for bombs to fall here in our backyard.
I saw that. I watched the State of the Union address. It was like now, it was a couple weeks ago. But when Donald Trump came up and he said, "I'm gonna give you an opportunity to make a statement. I'm gonna give you an opportunity I'm gonna give everybody else that's watching an opportunity to see where you stand." And he made the statement about America first, Americans first, our citizens first. And like almost everything else he said, one side of the arena, one side of the auditorium was up, and the other side was down.
It's so split. But our world is safer. I believe it's safer. I believe it's better when America is not weak and leading from behind, like Joe Biden, Barack Obama, like it would have been had a liberal one this time around. You know, I think it's stronger this way. I feel better about it. You know what I mean? I feel safer at home. And I think our military, you can see that the morale overall in our servicemen and women is higher. And you talk to them, they would much rather serve under this president than one of the ones who've come before. So
I saw a reel, and again, we talk about President Trump. Obviously, there's things we're for, but you know, there's some things that we don't like, like his language, and so that's this video specifically is one thing that comes up, that you know, you don't like the language that he uses. But you've probably seen it too, the video where they asked Joe Biden, they asked Kamala Harris, and they said, "So what is your message to Iran right now?" And they just say, "Don't." You know, and that's it. And one video I saw Kamala Harris, she just said, "Just one word, don't." And I thought, probably because she can't put more words in a sentence than one, you know.
Without messing it up. But,
exactly.
You know, they said that, you know, and our security services were aware, but Iran was actively trying to assassinate Trump.
Yeah.
And so he's made the statement, I got them before they got me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you think about the things, you know, and I would have things that I am not for that Trump does, no doubt about that. But you think about what the man's been through, and he doesn't need the position, he doesn't need the job.
True.
I mean, he's been that far away from being dead, you know, assassinated, and still yet he's serving our country. So I appreciate that. Awesome. But I actually just like the fact, and we'll talk, I think we should talk about this. I like the fact that he seems to be at least sure of himself, confident, and maybe even overly, you say maybe it's pride, I don't know. But at least he's not like, no principle, no backbone, worried about the room, checking the temperature before he makes a statement.
Yeah,
I'm glad that he has got enough grit, gumption, conviction, whatever, to take his stand and even take the heat that comes with it.
Mm-hmm. Somebody in leadership, you have to have that. People are not going to follow somebody that's not even confident in themselves or comfortable in their own skin and things like that.
And people want a leader, honestly. People want somebody to take lead and to be sure of it. And you don't have to be, you know, harsh, brash, beating people over the head with a blunt object, whatever. But I think people like it that especially if you've been put in that position, that you own that position, and that you lead with surety, with confidence. You also lead with compassion, of course. Lead on softly, the Bible talks about. But you're firm, like a tree. I've talked about planted by the, you know, you're set. I know where I'm at on this thing. And we talked about that in our church not long ago. Yeah. Remember I made this statement. I'm like, where are the men? I mean, in America, where are the men? Yeah. You know, the workforce, where are the men? The leaders in society, where are the men? But then in the church, that's what bothers me. Right. You know, God has chosen, and it's not like a lesser and a greater, but male and female are distinct. Different. God designed two sexes, two genders, man and woman, created He them, and they complete each other, not compete with each other. Right. But the roles are distinct. And God has appointed for the man to be the head of the household and to lead. He's a picture. It's a picture of the gospel. We've talked about that, how Christ in His church, and how Christ loves the church, and the church worships and serves, you know, Christ. And it's not like an oppressive thing. It's a beautiful picture of the gospel. But we have a dearth. I don't know what you'd call it. There's been a drift away. We have a lack of male leadership in the church in this day and hour. You've traveled some. I've traveled a lot. We go to a lot of churches. Many churches are not led by a woman pastor, but the church wouldn't go anywhere if it wasn't for the women pulling the weight. You're right. Because a lot of men are just showing up, one token service. Yeah. They don't lead their family in worship or spiritual things. The women have to do most of the work, and it's not supposed to be that way. No. The average man you'll see, even sadly today, you know, he's in the living room playing on his PlayStation. The average man is just stuck on his phone scrolling reels all day long. He's not connecting with his family. He's not leading his family, and he's not even connected to the church or stressing that in his family. Some of those, I don't know. Some of these women have to be embarrassed of the man that they marry. I mean, he's, you know, still like up middle age playing video games. You know what I mean, and acting like a boy. Yeah. You know, when I became a man, I put away childish things, and I'm not just harping on one thing. You can have your hobbies. I don't care about that. Absolutely. I'm talking about doing things at the neglect of fulfilling your role as a biblical man in your home or even in society, not being lazy at the job or at least wanting a job. A lot of men don't even want to work, especially sad for a Christian man. Yes. But, you know, in church, you know, church is not supposed to be dead and formal. Right. And every creature, you know, ought to be a preacher. You know what I mean? Every Christian ought to be a preacher. For sure. How do we do that? Well, say amen. Yeah. Say glory to God. That's right there. Why? You're training your family. Yeah. You're testifying to the church around you that that's true right there. But you don't hear that a lot anymore. We've what's the word? Demasculinized? That's probably not. We've feminized Christianity. Big time. Let's talk about that for a minute. Do you agree with it? There's like an effeminate spirit or a feminized spirit, a Jezebel kind of spirit to like the big tent, broad brush Christianity. That's what I was going to say, especially if you're just scrolling through and you're looking at just random churches and their live streams on Sundays and things like that. You do kind of sense that for sure. And we always, I don't want to say always harp on music, but I mean, that's one of the places that is evident is the music is like whiny. The music is talking about problems. It's very emotional. It's very like me-centered too, right? For sure. My needs, my wants, my desires. Yeah, exactly. And then I don't watch much of the music, much of the preaching either, but like what I do see is it's a lot of like preaching towards the emotions, and it's not so much like principle. It's not even so much like practical. It's just like, I know you're going through a hard time right now and this, that, and the other, and then they preach to the emotions, and that
I don't know. I don't know if that strengthens the church. I don't know if that strengthens the men demographic of your church. I don't know if that calls them to be leaders or if it calls them to. I don't know.
I feel like, well, with that style, what it does do is it almost teaches us that God is accountable to me to meet all of my needs without me being accountable to be faithful or obedient.
Oh yeah.
And we take that service part out, which our primary purpose is to serve. We're to steward whatever, but I see that a lot, just the overall atmosphere and the preaching. There's not much authority in the preaching, even from the way the preacher presents himself to the platform to the message that is preached. All of it has the edge taken off of it. Like, like the cutting edge fell off into the river and they never got it back.
Yeah, like a lot of apologetic preaching. Not apologetic as in defending your faith, but apologetic as in, I'm not going to try to come down so hard on you. Forgive me if I'm, but there's a lot of that as well.
And there's a lot of, just honestly, a lot of female leader in those kind of churches. A lot of female leadership, right? Yeah. The worship team is usually led by an overpowering woman. You look at most of their advertising. Maybe there's a pastor and his wife is the co-pastor, and she does more talking.
Yeah.
I think I told you I saw a video where it was like that. Like one of these little worship pastor guys was talking about how he got convicted and like bothered because he found out the music they were singing was so harsh. He talked about God destroying their enemies. And then his wife took over and did most of the talking. But that's the whole book of Psalms. A lot of the Psalms are about how God, imprecatory Psalms and things, but they're just scared to death of that kind of thing. But I don't want that, and I want to try to lead against that, preach against that. We're training up our young men. I've bragged on our teens here lately. These young men are looking like men.
Yeah.
They're wearing shirts and ties and saying amen, sitting on the front two pews. That's the way it ought to be.
Absolutely.
That's the way I want to go against this culture. You walk into a Target or they're trying to feminize your boy.
Yeah, they are.
They're trying to rob them of that. They're trying to dress it to where they blur the lines. We've battled that. We have a Christian school that's open enrollment. We had to take a strong stand on hairstyles. And there was a thing, remember that? They talk about like fairy hair.
Oh,
what is that?
I have no idea.
You know what I'm talking about? It's like that sparkly. I don't even get that. This is so insane to me. But anyway, it looks like, it just looks like I don't know, like a unicorn, like that dissolved and fell onto their scalp. But anyway, it's just like they have this but why would a boy?
I don't get it.
Ever want that? And that's just strange to me. They'd be playing with I don't even know that they make GI Joes anymore. They ought to be outside with with a football or a stick or something. They ought to be or inside even doing something else. I don't care what it is, but they should be trained up. And so I worry about that with our church. That strong Bible preaching will help take care of that. The kind of songs we sing help take care of that. We try to make sure that we hold the line on, let's look like men and ladies, and let's have manners and character and things of that nature. But it's okay. It really is.
It is. There is an attack, and so in the culture you look at, I was just thinking about this, in the culture you see this, and the culture sadly has a huge impact on the church because your church people are in the culture 6 days a week, and then they're in church on
maybe an hour, some of them,
Exactly, yeah. And so, but so if maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't, you look at the average ad, you look at the average commercial, even the average show, the man in the picture, the father, the husband, whatever. And I wish I could think of like an actual example, but he's almost like made out to look like an idiot. And then
that even started back in my day. Remember like Home Improvement, like Tim the Tool Man. You remember that old show?
I love.
But he was always like the dumb one in the show, which that was a pretty harmless show compared to what we have nowadays.
True.
But that's maybe a subtle attack on that.
Yeah.
So that phrase was big back a few years ago on toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And that's basically like taking a shot at any man that actually owns that and tries to be a man. Now, of course, it goes without saying, like we would never be for men being misogynist and jerks and abusive and stupid like that, right? But we're 100% for them fulfilling their role that God designed them to fulfill. And I believe there's a toxic masculinity wave in our country too, but it's the exact opposite of what the liberal would say. To me, it's the one who walks around, just like kind of hide, scared of his own shadow. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
And I preached on this in our church. I want, and my son doesn't know how to shoot a basketball and hit a ball and whatever. But he needs to know how to pray. He needs to know how to love church and treat people and read his Bible. And where are the men at? Some of these women come to church so faithfully, these ladies, they'll bring their kids, and where are you at, sir?
Yeah,
How come your wife's never seen you on an altar before?
Yeah.
How come you can't go knock doors, but your teenagers can every Wednesday? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's a problem. And it ought not be that way. Sometimes we give a real bad rap to these ladies. Well, these women are overpowering. They want to run everything. That's because men won't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And I said this in that sermon. I said, it said the world never burned a casual Christian at the stake. Most Christian men don't have to worry about getting burned at the stake. They can't even get on fire for God. You know what I mean? They're not going to even see revival. They don't even care. Nobody even knows they're a Christian.
I think in every man there's kind of like this. I mean, I know it's in me, and we've talked about it. I know it's in you. There's a part of us that when we pass on, we want to be remembered. And the word I use, like, we want to be legendary, right? We want to be a legend, but to our family, right? And to those who knew us,
It's like leaving a good testimony, a legacy, right?
Yeah,
a testimony.
Legacy. Yeah,
a good name is rather be chosen than great riches,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's Bible
a
too.
Goodly heritage.
There it is. Yeah. All right. So So I'm not crazy about thinking this, but and I'll go back to my word legendary, but. Somebody who left a legacy, all right, somebody that was quote unquote a legend, they weren't casual. Like, they weren't just on the fringe. Like, they were not lazy and lackadaisical when it came to whatever they were passionate about. They did crazy stuff. They did things that nobody else would do, and they led in ways that nobody else would lead, and so that's why they're remembered. And I think every husband, every man, every father needs to live a life like that, like where they have their family involved in the things of the local church. They have their family involved in ministries. They do, when they get back from work, they spend an hour in the front yard with their son, throwing the football with them, or the basketball with them, or things like that.
Being present, man, just doing it.
Just being present.
I mean, if David hadn't gone into the valley and killed Goliath, we probably wouldn't be talking a whole lot about. I mean, he would have still become king, maybe, but that story really is what people know: David and Goliath,
exactly.
Right? Not David and whatever, not David and the cheese and crackers that came before Goliath.
That's true.
They just know David and Goliath. So there's something about that. Just, we have a short span of life, just a short window of opportunity, and we need to make the most of it. There'll be a lot of men, they weren't called to preach or be a missionary, but if they've been blessed with a family and children, or they're saved, they're going to give an account of the judgment seat for that. So it's a very important thing. I want to try to rally our men to pray. Remember, we talked about that. We have prayer room before the services. Yeah. We need more men to come pray. And we have the pillars that are out in the front of the church. I'm going to put your hands on those pillars and pray. Pray for the power of God on this place. But whatever happened to that? It used to be, when I first started in the ministry, that I'd go to these little country churches, and before the service, they'd always have men join to pray. And they'd usually informally say, all right, all you men who want to pray, we're going to get out here and pray. Yeah. And we'd go outside a lot of times. And you hear those men praying. It sounded like a bunch of, dogs treeing a coon up in the mountains. Like, hey, but I loved that, man. They were crying, weeping, praying, begging God for things. Where's that? Now everybody's walking in with their little skinny pants on, 5 minutes after church starts, playing on their phone the entire service. Goodness. If the wind blew hard, it would knock them over. Yeah. I mean, they don't have anything to say in prayer because they don't spend any time praying throughout the week. You know what I mean? What in the world? Exactly. That's not the way. We're not going to see revival with that.
That's what I was going to say. We're not going to save America that way. We're not going to salvage our families that way.
I want to challenge you. I want to challenge all the men in our church. I mean, I hope you're still listening. If you've already turned it off, shame on you. But I mean, I want to challenge all the men in our church. Be a man. Yep. I mean, come to church. Be on the altar. Right? Go soul winning with us. Get on a bus route. Do something for God. Love people. Love your family. But let's do this thing. And men across America, the same. And you stick your neck out, somebody might cut your head off. I don't know. But if you don't stick your neck out, you'll never get ahead of them either. So, I mean, somebody's going to have to be willing to do the dangerous thing. For me to live is Christ, and to die is what gain.
Exactly. That's it. I want to go back to what you said earlier when you mentioned David and Goliath. And a lot of the great men and the great characters in the Bible, they're remembered by something that they did, but something that was out of the ordinary, like you said. But I thought about this. I thought about, like, Noah built the ark. Do you remember how many years that took? I don't remember. It was like 100.
120 or 100 years, yeah.
Something like that. That was a long time, man. But he put in the work, he put in the effort, and he's remembered for it. I thought about, we think about Daniel, think about the lion's den, right? Because he had a backbone, because he wasn't weak. And when they said, the politicians of the day and the leaders of the day said, you can't pray, he said, no, I'm still going to do it.
Nehemiah, right?
Same thing. Building up the wall. Ezra going back for the temple too. Even like John the Baptist, he got his head cut off, because he stood up and he said what was true, and he didn't worry about, like we referenced with President Trump earlier. He didn't care what the room would say. He didn't care what the backlash he would receive.
One thing that's interesting to me, you just mentioned the President Trump thing. How many people you think in our churches voted for somebody like that because they wanted that? They wanted a bold leader that would take charge, lead. And then why is it then that pastors are scared to death?
Oh, wow, yeah.
if they want that kind of a politician, maybe they'd follow that kind of a pastor,
for sure,
or that kind of a preacher.
Never thought about
as long
that.
as God was with him, as long as God was on him and he was doing it filled with the Spirit. I mean, so why? I mean, that's just the height of hypocrisy for some of these preachers who champion Trump, and then there's, I don't know what it is. They're so bought and paid for by whatever it is that's got them that they won't take their stand. They won't do right. But
wow,
I don't know. That's interesting to me to think about. Like, that's pretty popular in our country. So I mean, and Christ was that way. I mean, we're not talking about somebody who's a jerk. Jesus was far from a jerk, and he's our ultimate example. So there's different scenarios where he would be like a shepherd loving on these little sheep, that were scattered. Then there'd be times when he'd be flipping tables over because sin was going on. There'd be times whenever he would be harsh toward a bunch of Pharisees and kind to a woman caught in the act of adultery. I mean, it's just he knew how to be a leader in the right scenario. But the common thing was he was the leader, and he was, of course, the perfect example of a Spirit-filled man.
And you look at that, you look at what President Trump has done. Can you imagine? Like what somebody with that kind of, those kind of principles, somebody of that kind of caliber who was Spirit-filled?
I think we need to know, especially if we're going on pastor thing, did God call you to pastor or not? Well, then pastor. Did God put you there or not? Well, if he did, then he must want you to do what you're supposed to do there.
Yeah. I saw this reel the other day of a coach who came in. I forget what team it was, a college football team, but he walked into the large, not the locker room, but where they were watching film, and he walked in and he's like, some of you are wondering why I'm here. He's like, I know why I'm here. God sent me here. And maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But the fact that he was confident in what he would call his calling.
I wonder when the last time some preacher thought that.
Yeah.
There was a man sent from God whose name was John. I wonder if anybody ever, what if you walk in the pulpit on Sunday morning and you just remind yourself there was a man sent from God and his name is whatever your name is, and then climb up in that pulpit and obey the Lord. Because if God's in it and you obey, then it's right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Have that confidence in your calling.
But that's leadership from the pulpit. If we're wanting Christian men, there needs to be a man in the pulpit.
Start right there. Yeah. Absolutely. Maybe next couple episodes, talk about more in depth like toxic masculinity. Well, what the liberals label as toxic masculinity, but then let's talk about like biblical masculinity, like what it is.
Kind of break it down a little bit.
Exactly. Maybe we should do that.
It's a big topic. It's a needed topic. So
for sure.
And then maybe bring in a guest or two and talk about the other side of the equation. We probably ought not be the ones who give the expert advice on that.
Oh yeah, maybe we'll direct you to who you need to watch. Well, thank you so much for joining us again today for the Pilgrim's Perspective. All the men out there watching and listening, let's be men. Let's strive to honor and glorify God in the way we leave our homes and our families and our churches as well. But we appreciate you listening once again. Follow us on social media, subscribe, and share this with your friends and family so that way they can join us next time on the Pilgrim's Perspective.